our Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeehan.
Wow, thank you so much for this warm welcome. Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, you rock. I want to thank you, special thanks to the Central Committee for inviting me to be here with you today. A special thank you to Candlelight Fellowship Church for allowing us to use the building. All those that are here to help in any different manner. And I also want a special thank you to my good friends Karen and Tim Kastning for putting me up in their Lieutenant Governor's suite at their home. I appreciate the hospitality and the great breakfast, and for all of you that are here today, I also want to welcome you whenever you come through Southeast Idaho, Idaho Falls. I would love to be able to extend the same warmth, love, and hospitality that you've always given to me when I come through this part of the state. So thank you. So today what I would like to do is, first of all, just kind of give you a review. I know this was scheduled to be a legislative town hall, and some of your legislators are back home, and maybe some of them are still in Boise. So thank you for keeping the event and allowing me to come talk to you about what's happening in Boise, and then open up to you any questions that you might have about bills that are working their way through the session. When's the session going to wrap up? And then after that, I would like to talk more to an extent with you about a very important issue that is of growing concern to people in our state and in our nation as it relates to what is being taught in our schools, the indoctrination. Yes, I use that word, indoctrination. So I have started up a task force, and as your Lieutenant Governor, we're going to do a deep dive in that, and I'd like to talk to you about that after we get done answering some questions on legislative issues. But first of all, I also want to congratulate all of you for your efforts and to be engaged and involved in the local community, because I feel like as conservatives and Republicans, maybe we have lost our way a little bit in some of those local positions. We've focused so much on electing people to the legislature to make sure they support the right policy, and we focus a lot on getting the right people elected into the executive branch of government on the state level, and same thing in the congressional level, and we focus a lot of our attention on the presidential race. But we've forgotten the importance of the lower levels and so many opportunities to get involved in what's happening in our school districts, in our library boards, on our library boards, our public health districts, our county commissioners, city council. There's so many districts and areas and boards for us as conservatives to get involved in. And I want to thank you for your commitment to that. You are, as a county, you are leading the way and setting an example for the rest of the state of what we need to do to get back engaged on those local levels. And you've also been taking a little bit of heat, I notice, locally. For those of you, any of those of you who are here today, I see your official Kootenai County Republican candidate ballot. So if as I read these names, if any of you are here, would you please stand? If you're a candidate for the Kootenai Hospital District, Duke Johnson, Chris Nordstrom, or Stephen Matheson, would you please stand? For candidate for Community Library Network, Rochelle Otteson, and Vanessa Robinson. Thank you. Candidate for East Side Highway District, Sub-District 2, Angela Sieverding. Sorry if I don't get these. I have one of those names too that's kind of hard to pronounce. Are you here today? Angela Sieverding? Candidate for Post Falls Highway District, Sub-District 1, David Russell. Thank you. Candidate for Post Falls Highway District, Sub-District 2, Jeff Tyler. I think he's here. And candidate for Alpine Meadows Water and Sewer District, Bill Zach. Kootenai County Water District Number 1, Norman Milam. I just want to express a special appreciation and thank you to all of the individuals who are standing forward to serve in these often unrecognized and underappreciated positions. But these are so important because there's so many decisions, as we have learned in this past year, that happen on these levels. And just in case there happen to be any media here, I might temper my words a little bit. But as has been reported in the fake news locally, that that this shouldn't be your role, that the partisan politics shouldn't be entering into these positions. Well, so what? Just because it's not written that way into the statute doesn't mean that we as conservatives shouldn't be vetting those people and be willing to put our logo behind those people. Because we're being naive if we think that the other side isn't doing that. And the media says things like, well, instead of putting partisan people, we should be appointing people who are qualified for the job. Well, okay. You tell me all the people that are serving on the local school board districts now that have a clue about budgeting. When the state of Idaho spends 67% of our budget and your money to the education of our kids, 67% of that goes to the local school districts. And there are people that serve on those local districts that don't have a clue about money issues, how to balance a budget. Well, we don't, I guess we can't really say that about some of our, even those in Washington, D.C. about that. But that's why it's so important for us to get qualified people to serve on those positions from the lowest level all the way to the top. Even in state government, it should work that way too, that the many people that are appointed to serve on boards, commissions, and lead our government agencies should be people who are qualified for the position and not political appointments. So, thank you for your effort locally. Continue to stand strong and don't back down when we all stand for the truth, then we know that the arrows are going to come at us and we're going to be attacked. But the one thing that we can always say when we go home at the end of the day, that we did what we feel that we're being led to do, and that is to stand for truth and stand for principle. So, all right, I'm going to start discussing things that happen in Boise, still happening in Boise. I'm going to kind of go back a little bit and just kind of recreate a story that I have shared on the trail as I've been traveling around the state, talking to Republican Central Committee, Lincoln banquets all over. And that is sharing the story of where we are today compared to where we were just a little over a year ago, where a little over a year ago in March, this time last year, we all were just living our lives as we knew it. We were going to church, we were going to work, we were socializing with our friends and our family. And this insidious disease started creeping into our state. It had started spreading across the country, around the world, and it started creeping into our state. And March the 25th, at 2 days before our governor he declared an extreme emergency in the state of Idaho and issued a public health order which did three things. His public health order directed all of us as individuals to stay home at our house, whether we were sick or not. His public health order went through and by definition defined and declared some businesses in Idaho to be called essential business and some businesses in our state to be unessential businesses. And then by definition, all of the people who worked in those businesses, if you were declared an unessential business, then by definition, the people who worked in these so-called unessential businesses were declared as unessential people. Now, yes.
I think the COVID-19 is the reason why a lot of businesses have failed. It's all because of COVID-19. It's all bullshit lies.
I love this fluid conversation. So this was a slap in the face to so many people. I knew personally of a single mother that was a hairdresser, and she was trying to raise 5 young girls all on her own. And she was devastated. She said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't put food on the table, and I can't pay my heating bill for my family. It was so devastating. People that I also knew of would come home and with tears in their eyes, crying, because our governor had defined that some of us were not essential people. It was devastating. It did not come from the Trump administration. We're going to find out. I have my instinct of where that came from, but it did not come from the Trump administration. And lastly, what this public health order did is it prevented all of us from being able to gather for social occasion, and most offensive of all, interfered with our right to worship freely as we see fit. All of you, people all over the state of Idaho, were crying out to their lawmakers, their elected officials, to please help with this. Please go back to Boise and restore our rights. Please tell the governor that this is not right. We need to fix our statutes so that no matter who is ever in that position, and God forbid someone like Nancy Pelosi from California moves to North Idaho and wants to run for governor, just think of what she could do in that position without strengthening our laws and strengthening our Constitution to make sure that we learn from our experience from last year. So, all right, so your elected officials, your state representatives and your senators went to work and they crafted bills. I saw a list of over 40 pieces of legislation that your lawmakers had crafted and put together to deal with this situation. And in my view, we come back to, every year the legislature comes back to Boise and there's a budget. The one thing that our Constitution gives the legislative branch of government to do, it is the policy-setting branch of government, but the one duty that they have is to appropriate the funds. And we received $8 billion into Idaho last year, which by Constitution, our legislature was left out of that. So they went to work and they crafted all these bills to come back to Boise the 1st of January and fix what was broken from last year. And they were working towards all of these issues, resolving them. What I was going to say, in my view, those were the single most important issues that we needed to address in this legislative session. You could pass a maintenance budget and go home. But the most important thing that our legislative body should have done was pass those very important rules or changes to our statute and to our Constitution. So the legislature created these bills, Senate Bill 1136, which was the statute of code that deals with the emergency declaration, and it is in the statute of code that deals with martial law. They also crafted House Bill 135 that dealt with that situation when it comes to natural disasters in the state. And they crafted together a bill that would be a constitutional provision to call themselves back into session during these difficult times. The bill passed out of the Senate with no problem, and it's in the House. I don't anticipate a problem with that, the passage of that. The bill says that if 60% of the members of the legislative body feel compelled enough that there's a situation that they need to come back into session, then they can. And they also have to be specific about what they're coming back into session for. Some people on on my radical left, they voted against that. Some of them said the threshold isn't high enough, it should be 67%. That is a threshold that a lot of other states have, but then there were members of the House that wanted it to be a simple majority. So what they compromised on, the legislative body compromised on 60%, and that's where it's at. So I do believe that that will pass and go through. That will be a proposed change to our Constitution that doesn't go to the governor's desk. It will go to you, all of you. We, the people, will vote on that change to amend our Constitution, and that only has to pass by a simple majority for the people of Idaho, and we will change our Constitution. Okay, so let me tell you the sad and sorry state of Senate Bill 1136 and House Bill 135. So a week ago, after Senate Bill 1136 passed the Senate, there was no problem getting it past the House, and it passed the Senate on a partisan vote. So all Republicans voted for it, and all Democrats voted against it. And then, of course, when that bill went, I mean, you all know what happened. The governor vetoed the bill. He vetoed the bill to constrain his own power and authority. Now, I was informed that you would like to maybe understand what happened after the governor vetoed the bill and why the Senate was unable to override the veto. As I explained on my Capitol Clarity radio program, which was an extension of what we did at the Capitol every Thursday, Capitol Clarity, to shine the light on to the people of Idaho what's happening at the State House. What I said on the radio, that in my view, the Senate's inability to override the governor's veto is a lack of leadership. When it was a minority of the legislature that voted to sustain the governor's veto, a minority of the legislature, and which included 5 Republican senators. So this bill originally, when it passed through both bodies, 81 members of the legislative body voted for this very important piece of legislation. That's 77% of the legislature voted to override the veto. They voted to put this policy into place. 77% of our legislative body voted to put this policy into place. And then the governor vetoed it. It came back to the Senate. The Senate took a vote, and they failed to sustain override the veto, which also requires a 67% majority. So 5 senators who originally voted for the bill flipped, and they turned. Well, I'll name them. Senator Lodge, she's from the Treasure Valley. Senator Patrick, he's from Twin Falls. Senator Martin, he's from Boise. Senator Woodward, he's from North Idaho, District 1. And I mentioned her, Senator Guthrie. He's from the Soda Springs, Preston area, part of the state. The problem I have with their vote is, I don't think anybody should be persuaded to vote one way or another on a bill. I feel like people should be able to vote their conscience. But if you have the conviction in your heart to vote a certain way on an important policy like this, and you're going to take your whole caucus out on a limb, you're taking 81 members of the legislature out on a limb, 77% of the legislature out on a limb to take a strong stand against the governor. You better commit, if you're convicted enough that this is the right thing to do, that you're going to vote for that, then you should not be waiting for whoever a former governor was who called you up over the weekend, or a member of IACI, big business in Idaho, to cause you and persuade you to change your vote. It's a lack of leadership, and what strong leadership would do would be to say, if you're going to do this, this is where we are. Both of those bills were changed, if not once, but twice, to build a consensus. And to the caucus, if you're going to do this, and you're going to take all of us out on a limb, you need to hold to that vote. And if you don't, there will be a consequence. And the consequence being, 3 of them that I know of were committee chairs. That's the consequence. You will be removed from your position, and you will no longer be a part of leadership. Now, I feel that like so many of you here today, and so many people all across the state of Idaho, the governor and the minority of the legislature issued a gut punch to us, because last year, our individual rights were violated. Our sovereign rights as a state were violated, and our conservative principles that we believe in as Republicans and as conservatives, all 3 of those things were violated. And we all suffered a gut punch because of this. But the good news is that there are next generation warriors that are rising up. Rising up like a phoenix out of the ashes. And I am also here to tell you that the future of our party, our Republican Party, will be for those who embrace the concept of freedom and liberty and justice for all. And as a party, we embrace that. We don't label each other, and we don't seek to chastise those who are standing up and fighting for those principles, which sadly I see that happening all across the state. But what is happening in our state and what's happening in our nation with this excessive government overreach in all of our lives, the the deficit spending, the national debt. We have a $30 trillion debt in our nation now. And in Washington, D.C., it seems so easy for them to just push a button and send $8 billion more dollars to the state of Idaho. Last year, $8 billion. You can have $8 billion again this year. It seems so easy for them to do that. But it's shameful what we're doing to the next generation. It is shameful the legacy that we're leaving onto our young people. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I am a numbers person, but $30 trillion debt, we have 300 million people in America. That means each and every one of us has a $100,000 debt to the federal government today. I mean, for no matter where you're at in life, whether you're an elderly population and you've worked hard your whole life and you've paid off your mortgage on your home, welcome back. You have another new debt. And to the young people who are trying to raise families and trying to buy a house, they can't afford a house, on top of that debt of a mortgage, they're going to have this additional debt from the federal government. So it's a shame what we are pushing off to our younger generation. And it's time for us to start standing strong, standing against that oppressive and regressive and perverse federal government. All right, so I'm going to talk about a few other pieces of legislation, kind of where we're at in the session, and then I'd be happy to open up for some questions from you, and then I want to talk to you about this greater concern of what's happening in our educational system. So where are we in this process down in the Boise Capitol? We are now at, well, as of Thursday, we were at the 100th day of the legislative session. I was a freshman representative when I served in the longest ever legislative session, and that was 118 days. And so as of Thursday, we were at 100 days into this legislative session. And what do we have to show for it is a really good question. When the legislative body comes back home, what are they going to have to show for the time that was spent over there? But we are at the Senate adjourned on Friday. The House is still working through a lot of bills. The House is doing some really good things this year. They're creating some innovative ideas and reform for education. The House has been trying to put forth some form of tax relief for the citizens of Idaho. Sadly, a lot of those bills, they come over to the Senate side and they just die. They either don't get a hearing or they die. And so we need to also take a look at our Senate body and make sure that we work to get, you have some good senators from this area, so I'm not speaking about your representative, but across the state, we need to be taking a look to make sure that statewide, the people in those positions are following the right principles. So there is still some hope for some tax reform. There is a bill that seeks to lower income tax for the individual. I understand there's some form of property tax relief that may still come forward. Although I will say that there's really no way that we can control your burden on local property tax until those local budgets get balanced and under control. Because if those budgets continue to grow, then your tax burden is going to continue to grow. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the value of your home. And people need to understand that this is it's a ratio. As long as your home value could double, but as long as they keep the budget even or reduced, then your levy rate actually goes down. So what you pay on your property tax is always a function of the budget, the local budget. And there were a few efforts that were brought forth to put some constraints on the growth of those local budgets, and unfortunately those don't make it through the House. But it's not helpful when people that have been there, when career politicians have been there for too long, take more of a view that if we constrain these local budgets, it's going to hurt the local levels of government, and forgetting about the impact that it has on you and your budget and your family. But that is what I have found with people that have been in those positions for too long. And honestly, it was my own experience as well when I served as a state representative for 10 years, that you start thinking that in terms of more like what's right for the government and for the agency rather than what's right for the taxpayer and the individual. So that's why I think it's really important to keep things fresh in the elected positions so that we remain and honor what the purpose and intent of our legislative body is, and that is to be a citizen legislature, to represent the people. And so there's still hope for tax relief for us. There was a bill that was worked on with the Senator Zito to enforce and protect our Second Amendment rights, the onslaught, the threat to our Second Amendment through the Biden administration. Some of the politics that happened in the body there, the Senate was holding that bill up, but they were able to work together, and it was really because of the attention and the pushback and the pressure by the people of Idaho. Strong pressure on the Senate body that they finally agreed to. They amended the bill a little bit. It's not as strong as the original bill was, but they agreed to support it, and it went through the Senate, so I don't see any problem at all with that bill going through the House to protect our Second Amendment rights here in Idaho. And then, that's definitely And then I'm going to talk real briefly about the situation with education budgets and a policy bill that it has started working its way through, but not go too much into depth in that area, because then I want to reserve a lot of my comments for the remainder of our day. But there started to be a lot of attention that was being brought to what is happening in our schools, especially in the higher education system, of the things that were being taught in the universities, and then speculation of what was being taught in our public schools. And at first, some of the lawmakers scoffed at these concerns of people. They did. They literally scoffed. Representative Priscilla Giddings was reading a book to show some of these books that are being read to pre-K age 0 to 5, these young minds. And so as the public attention began to grow on this important issue, an interesting thing started happening. These budgets that just would fly through the Senate with very little debate. There was a budget to give a federal grant to a nonprofit that had some very questionable books that they were listing on their website to develop a model for pre-K across the state of Idaho. Well, why are we asking the federal government to give us money to study how to do this? Because they want us to do it the way they want it to be done, not the way that we want to do it here in Idaho. So that bill flew through. It was a $6 million a year grant for 3 years, $18 million federal dollars. It flew through the Senate, got to the House, and it was killed. And
How much is his wife getting? How big was her grant?
some of the leaders in the state were condemning the action of the House and saying, we're going to bring this bill back. And they did. They brought it back again. And again, it passed through the Senate, and it's languishing over on the House side. So I don't know yet what's going to happen on that one. But then we talk about the higher education budget. Came through the Senate. What they did, because more people were starting to recognize the truth of the indoctrination that's happening in our institutions of higher learning, they decided to tweak the higher ed budget and remove $400,000 from their multi-million-dollar budget to try to teach them a lesson. Well, so they passed that through the Senate, and it went to the House, and the House voted the budget down. The House is doing some good things. And Boise State University was the biggest culprit of some of these things. They said, oh, okay, well, we're going to back off on some of our University Foundation 200 classes, which was the speculation. We're going to say that we're going to cease holding these classes. So they did that right after the House voted the budget down, and right before the legislature went to recess. But then as soon as the legislature came back, they reinstated those classes. So, and then after the higher ed budget, then the K-12 budget was up for a vote. It passed out of actually, I don't think it made it to the Senate. It started on the House side, and the House lawmakers voted that one down. Again, because of some of the concerns. And of course, the fake media, like they do, they twist the facts and they say, that, oh, we hate teachers and we don't support our school teachers. And it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the policy. And because Senate leadership said that the budget committee is not the policy committee, so if the policy committee can come up with a policy bill to say we're not going to teach these things in our schools, then we'll redo these budgets and we can all go home. So the budgets have been reworked. The policy bill, this is how easy things can work when they are committed. A bill was introduced in House Ways and Means. That next day they had a public hearing for it in the committee, and then they suspended rules and voted on that on the House floor. And it passed with overwhelming support. Now it's going to come to the Senate, and we'll see what happens there. Please contact your senators as we come back to session on Monday. If that bill passes the legislature and those budget bills go through, really, there's no reason for the legislature to remain much longer than this coming Friday. So they can go home and we can all feel safe. We'll hang on to our wallets and move on with our lives. So, but at this point, if there are any specific questions that you have on any of these bills or any other important pieces of legislation that I haven't adequately addressed, then I'm happy to take your questions. One of the things that was coming to our attention was work from a lobby group. It was called the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and they started doing some research. Yes, they do good work. They started doing some research into the things that were happening on our campuses in Idaho, and especially at Boise State University. They were bringing attention to things like this. Boise State University team players kneeling during the national pledge and the national anthem. Things like this, where a contractor, a police officer who was shot and wounded in the line of duty, and left unable to walk. His family was running, it was a coffee shop on Boise State called Big City Coffee, and they were literally chased off the campus because they displayed this flag, the thin blue line flag on the university campus. They were chased off a campus. Other things, they were looking at the classes, the curriculum, where University Foundation's 200 classes were teaching kids how to study ethics and morality according to Harry Potter and the Lion King. It's no joke. And they were also teaching classes that questioned the American dream, asking, is this a reality? Is it truth? Is it there for everyone? Or is it just a nightmare? And that was what was used in the description of their course. And then other things like this, where this was a professor at Boise State University who was teaching people how to call for via the end. He was calling for a revolution for the end of police and white violence that targets black people, which is long overdue, teaching students how to protest things like cover your face so that you cannot be ID'd by cameras, try not to go alone, always bring friends along with you, put your phone in airplane mode or leave it in a safe location. A university professor teaching students how to protest like this. I don't know. And then at Boise State University, I have a video to show you where part of their instruction for some of their experience in their Office of Cultural Diversity, it's called the Tunnel of Oppression. If any of you have heard of this, the Tunnel of Oppression, and I have a video that I want you to see what's happening at Boise State University. Jason, can you play that video?
Mascot. We've narrowed it down to 4 choices, and tonight you get to pick which one is your favorite. Let's start it off with the wet bath. What? Hold on. It can work so that
She called this person a wetback.
Wow. Okay, all right. So, thank you very much, but I don't think that will be our choice. So, right, we have several other options. How about we bring out the nigger? Yo, what's up? You got it. Wow.
If any of us said that word, we would be,
So, all right, that's not what we're going to go with. That's okay. How about we try out the cracker?
Thank you, everyone. White power, white power. Anyone? I knew you guys would be pretty American about this because there are no dirty fucking niggers or beaners that are good enough to be our mascot here. Everyone knows that the only good mascot is a white mascot. Even Jesus was white.
Disgusted you right now.
You don't even look anything like me. I can't even believe anyone would think about having a mascot like you.
What the fuck is wrong with you? You're white. You should be honored that we chose you to be a mascot.
If you want to honor me, you can get the fuck off the stage.
Whoa, all right, calm down. There's no need to get so upset. We won't go with that one. We have our last choice. We can call this one by several names. There's the redskin, the brave, the savage, the warrior, whatever you'd like. Let's welcome the redskin.
referred to as the redskin.
So I take it from your silence that this is going to be our new mascot. Everybody, we have the redskin.
My hair is real. My features are real. My culture is real. My people are real. I am a human being. I'm not a mascot.
I am not a mascot.
I'm not a mascot. I'm not a mascot.
I am not a mascot.
I am not a mascot.
Not a mascot.
I am not a mascot.
thanks, Jason, for showing that. There are other videos of this tunnel of oppression showing young people standing in line and people of different ethnicities running up and down the line, screaming and yelling at people. This is what's happening at Boise State University. It's being taught there. And why does the radical left get away with using terminology that we would never even think about using words like that? It's anti-American what's happening on our campuses. And Boise State University is not alone. At the University of Idaho, a law student came to me and told me about a class that he was required to go to this panel, which was conducted by a person named Ibram Zendi, who's a very, very controversial. His teachings are very anti-American. He was required as a law student to attend this panel. It was called How to Be Anti-Racist. And if he didn't go to the panel, he was not going to have his grades transcribed and he wouldn't be able to graduate from the program. So as we started learning more and more about what was happening in our universities, the other thing that was interesting, of course, through this grant, the $6 million grant to begin teaching some of these same things to our 0 to 5 year old children, people started waking up and saying, what is happening in our schools? And the message across the country, this is a hot, hot topic all across the nation. And I remember going home, was right before, it was after the 2-week session break, and going back to Boise to start the session back up again on Easter Sunday, and I was having Easter brunch with my family, and my mother was there, and she looked at me as I was getting ready to leave and come back to Boise. She said, what is our governor doing about this? What's happening in our schools? And I looked at her and I said, sadly, nothing. But I thought about my answer, my response to my mother, and it bothered me about my response to her. And as I was driving back to Boise, because I had already looked at other states, the state of North Carolina, their lieutenant governor was working to put together a task force to study what was happening on this issue in North Carolina. So I came back to Boise, and on Monday morning I said to my chief of staff, Jordan, I said, Jordan, we're gonna do this, let's do this. He looked at me, he goes, can we? Like, well, there's nothing in the law, nothing prevents. I am the lieutenant governor. I'm a constitutional officer duly elected by the people of Idaho. I do have a budget. Which, thank you, the legislature did pass my budget through, thank you. I can do what I feel is important to represent the people of Idaho. And because there's such a strong voice on that issue, I worked to put together an announcement that I was forming a task force to study the indoctrination in our education system. That's how I worded it. And of course, fake news. Fake news, they mock all of us in our efforts, but that doesn't dissuade me. It shouldn't dissuade any of us because they're fake. But that's right. So we're putting together this task force, and we put in a press release, an announcement that we were forming this, and we were soliciting feedback from Idahoans. And I have received comments from 40 people across the state that want to serve on this task force. 40 people from all over the state. Parents, teachers, former state board members, the Idaho State Board Association, lawmakers, and so, but we're starting interviews next week because I need to keep it at a manageable balance, and we're going to interview participants, and then Representative Giddings volunteered and offered to serve as co-chair of the task force. And I'm really excited. She is a warrior. She is one of these warriors that I'm telling you about that's rising up. And so she and I are going to work together on this task force. We are putting together, we're going to meet, we're looking at meeting 4 times. Our first meeting in the end of May. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to really dig in and study what is this critical race theory, because some people deny that it's there, or they know it's there and they're just lying. I think Karen Kastning had some copies of, I don't know if she's here, if she has, but it's a good description from the Hillsdale College of what this critical race theory is. So I would encourage you to grab a copy of that and learn about it. But it is an effort to change America as we know it, the greatest form of government in the history of man, 245 years. This form of government we have that is, it's a constitutional republic form of government. It is not a true democracy. But what's shocking and what is revealing about how deep this indoctrination has gone into our educational system, one of my very closest friends from Idaho Falls, who's a school teacher, I was home a month or so ago, and she was telling me she was shocked to find out, and she wanted to argue with me that we were not a democracy. We were not a true democracy. I said, well, she said, why are we not that? I said, well, because that's not what our Constitution says. But for her to think, and she's a school teacher, for her to think that we have that form of government, and you gave me some info. I saw on your Facebook page a textbook that's being taught in Post Falls. American Government class, thank you for sharing that with me, which talks about how we have a democracy, a democratic form of government. And I also read in that book that states are not sovereign. And this is what's being taught in our schools, our high schools. And so it may not be the critical race theory right now that's being taught in our schools, but it's certainly questionable books about our form of government. I've also, since making the announcement and asking people to send me information, I have seen pictures of, in the classroom, pictures of Obama Biden on the wall of the class. Now, I don't know that that's what's happening in our schools here in Idaho. It might have been a California school, and I'm going to confirm that. But let's make sure that we have laws in Idaho that do not permit political signs to be in our children's classrooms. So just the other day, we issued another press release because what we did was we had put together on the Lieutenant Governor's website a portal, a link that, because we were being flooded with phone calls and emails and concerns from people all over the state about what's going on. So we created a portal on our website and we put this press release out encouraging people, Idahoans, parents, students, teachers, business people, if you see something that's happening that you have a concern, just let us know about it. And that in itself is a step in the right direction where we're shining the light on this. And then what the other devastating news that we found out Monday, April 19th, was a proposed rule under the Biden administration. And I have this on my Facebook page, and it's on my newsletter that I've just recently put out. It is this proposed rule that the Biden administration will be implementing critical race theory into our elementary and secondary education schools. Well, they're seeking to do this, and they're seeking to do this the same way that Common Core worked its way into our schools under the Obama administration, and it's all through the grant process. So there's billions of dollars that will be made available to applicants in Coeur d'Alene applicants in Boise, applicants in Idaho Falls. All you have to do is apply for a grant and say how you're going to do these things. But in the rule, and the rule is very specific, in the rule calls out examples of what, I'm just going to read some of what's written in the rule. For example, there is growing acknowledgement of the importance of including in the teaching and learning of our country's history both the consequence of slavery and the significant contributions of Black Americans to our society. Now, there's nothing wrong with recognizing the history of our country, but they specifically call out landmark effort, the 1619 Project, as an example of what could and should be included in these teaching methods. This 1619 project has been declared to be a false replication of history, and it was something that President Trump was attempting to get rid of, and now we have the new Biden administration that's putting it right back in. It also calls out this controversial anti-American scholar, Ibram Kendi, and it's specifically written into the rules. And one of the things, there's two priorities. They want these learning methods to take into account certain things. One of the things, take into account the systemic marginalization, biases, inequities, and discriminatory policy and practice in American history. Did the civil rights movement mean nothing? It's not enough. For the radical left, it's not enough. And they want to go deeper, and they want to change the way, the America that we love and honor. As a second priority in these rules is that they recognize and acknowledge that young people get most of their information from social media, and they encourage the teaching in the classroom of how they should go to more mainstream medias, which, well, we know all about that. Do we want to be teaching our kids to consider CNN or MSNBC to be the mainstream media? But that's what they're written into these federal rules that was proposed just last Monday. So the first thing my task force committee is going to do, there is an opportunity to submit written comment by May 19th, and we are going to submit written comment in opposition to this proposed rule for the state of Idaho. And it's really sad and unfortunate that the last 2 days, our State Board of Education met in Boise. Well, they meet virtually, so wherever they were having a virtual meeting. And the former president of State Board of Education and the current State Board of Education were basically dismissive. The incoming president said that he was shocked about what is being deemed indoctrination in our classroom. And I just say, do you not know about this rule? Are you not aware of what is at our doorstep? Or are you not being honest? That's a possibility too. So whether it's the superintendent of education or the State Board of Education or the individual school districts that would have the opportunity to apply for these grants, we need to stop this in its tracks. And make sure that it doesn't come to Idaho, because it is at our doorstep. It's here, yeah. So I think it's just dismissive for leaders in education to not recognize the concerns of thousands and thousands of Idahoans across the state. But again, not being a person who just wants to criticize, I am going to continue to stand up and lead out on these important issues for our state. So Thank you for your time today. We're almost at the noon hour. We probably have a few more minutes for any other questions on this and our effort. But what I will say is this past year, what we've learned, it's just, the age-old battle of humanity, where there's an oppressor and then there is the oppressed. Until God's glory is revealed for us as humanity, we will continue to struggle with that. And we are all called to stand forward and do our part to push back against all of this. And so just like the people of the chosen people of God, the Israelites, who were captured and enslaved in Egypt, and God brought the 10 diseases and famines to the people, to the Pharaoh, to the Egyptians, so too are the things that we are going to face. Last year it was the COVID-19 virus. Next year it might be something else. It'll be something else after that. What we need to learn from our experiences, we cannot allow the virus or anything else to continue to divide us as people and work to take down the greatest nation in the history of mankind and our form of government and capitalism, which has done more to raise the misery of the human condition up. So thank you for everything that you do to stay and protect Idaho and keep Idaho great. Thank you so much for your warm welcome, and I'll be back, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.